And so if we have been taught, like I was, that to show your emotions, to wear your heart on your sleeve, to be sensitive, to feel it all is somehow a bad, unlikable, annoying thing, then naturally I'm going to shut that down to stay liked and connected, which unfortunately just perpetuates the whole cycle, the whole issue. Hey, I'm Hannah, your host of Too Much, Not Enough. After a life-threatening burnout in 2021, I released the brittle version of success that was slowly killing me and built a life that feels as good as it looks. This podcast is for ambitious, soul-led humans ready to stop shrinking and start living big, bold, fully aligned lives. So if you've ever felt like too much and not enough, join me and my guests as we take an unfiltered deep dive into why being the real you was never the problem, and how to create a life your nervous system actually likes. Let's get into it. Welcome back, Wild One. Perhaps, like me, you were tricked into believing that the way that you experience the world is somehow wrong, that you feel too deeply, too much, and so you learned to turn down the volume just to survive. It might be your path to feel it all, but when that depth gets labeled as anxiety, depression, mental fragility, no wonder we start to avoid it. The truth is, pain demands to be felt. It's a huge part of being alive. You are not too sensitive, too dramatic, or too crazy, and you are not destined to live under the weight of anxiety and depression forever, like I once thought I was. You are a truth seeker, and that is the future. So this episode is here to remind you of your fucking power. Today on Too Much Not Enough, it's just you and me, cutie, and we're going to pull apart one of the most damaging cultural myths, that expressing emotion is a problem to fix or a flaw to hide. We're going to unpack how too emotional has been used to silence and shame us out of our truth, and why reclaiming your emotional expression might just be one of the most radical acts of self-trust and self-compassion that you can make. So it's interesting that I am recording this episode today because I just got back from a cottage weekend away with 12 of my friends and my partner and 2 of my friends' toddlers. So it was a big weekend, a lot of people, and I had such a great time. And as I was reflecting, I had some old feelings of shame about who I am come up. And we talk a lot on this podcast about becoming so fucking comfortable with the truth of who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, the messy, the amazing, and being able to hold all of those things at once. Having compassion for the nuanced human being that you are, and diving into the magic that comes from that place. And I have spent the last decade basically on a journey of coming back to that truth of who I am. And it kind of became this like roundabout circle because as a kid, I was labeled as too emotional, too sensitive, and too dramatic. 3 things which I think kind of all point to the same thing, which is people's inability to receive the truth that comes from a quote unquote overly emotional and overly sensitive being. And I'll come back to that. As I have gotten older and realized that my sensitivity, my emotional depth is in fact one of my absolute greatest gifts, I leaned more into that. And so much has unfolded from that place. My ability to see people, like truly deeply make people feel seen, is one of my greatest strengths in my friendships. It's one of my greatest strengths as a coach. And it is one of my greatest strengths, I believe, in this podcast, of being able to share stories that make people feel less alone, which I think is true medicine. And that comes from the fact that I feel the entire spectrum of life, often all within the same day. I can go from deep depths of sorrow and sadness to like true high on life exhilaration and back again, and then everything in between. But when I was younger, I must have received feedback stories that made me feel that that was something to be ashamed of. Probably partly because I wasn't able to process and examine those emotions in the same way that I can now. And as I got older, I was constantly wary and hypervigilant about whether I was being too dramatic, too emotional, too sensitive about things. And the reason I brought up my weekend away is because as I was coming home, I was having that little chat that we always do with the little gremlin in our head who goes over everything you did on a night out or a weekend away with your friends or on a first date. And it's like, why did you do that? Do you think that was too much? Do you think they liked that? Do you think they didn't? And I was starting to go down that rabbit hole of like, oh, was I too emotional or too dramatic or too this or that this weekend? And it brought me back to a place where I deeply believed that those were bad, broken parts of me. And don't get me wrong, I'm not like fully absolved of that now where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can be whoever I want, whenever I want, and I don't care and it doesn't matter. I still reflect and analyze my behavior, but I am able to hold it with more self compassion now than I used to be. I am able to look at something and for two things to be true at once. For the fact that maybe I was a little bit oversensitive or a little bit dramatic about something, and that didn't make me a bad person or didn't mean that my friends should reject me or dislike me. And so over the years of coming back to embracing this deeply sensitive, deeply emotional side of me, I've really wondered where this belief that emotions are weakness, that they are bad, that they are something to be ashamed of has really come from, and who does it actually serve? And I have a few different theories about this. I won't get into all of them. I think that, we could go down the patriarchy route, we could go down the capitalism route. But the route that I would like to go down more than anything is something that is very personal to me, and is the fact that because as a triple water sign, neurodivergent projector, emotional projector, I feel the world very deeply. And before I understood how to healthily experience my emotions, the tidal waves that kept knocking me over were really difficult. And the story that I had built up that I should be ashamed of how emotional I was in experiencing life, that I would cry at commercials on TV, or that I would have an outburst when I felt someone didn't understand me or didn't get where I was coming from. The shame that I had built up around that expression of me led to me suppressing my emotions very deeply, to being fearful of them, to having this belief that they were too dark, too dangerous to really let them out and feel them all. And so I would keep them tucked away, locked down. I wouldn't let them move through me. I would ignore the signals that were coming from my body through my emotions and pretend that I somehow knew better than the emotions were showing me. And it led to me becoming so misaligned, not only in my life, but in relation to myself. And that is what I believe led to my daily anxiety, to my deep, dark bouts of depression. And the more I shoved those feelings down, the more I pretended they didn't exist or worried that they were too much to let out for the world to see, the worse my anxiety got, the harder my depression got, and the less grounded and present I felt. The moment I started coming back to the truth of who I was and pulling off the layers of the stories I had collected over my life of how I was wrong, shameful, messy, broken, so on and so forth, and actually started to have compassion for those sides of me, the more I was able to feel my feelings and not be so afraid of the waves of emotion that would rise and fall all the time within me. I could let things move through me. I could be disappointed. I could feel let down. I could experience grief. I could be angry and not shame myself for it, not shut myself down, and instead realize that it was such a normal part of being human. And the more I did that, the less anxious I felt, the less depressed I felt, the more sure of myself I felt, and the more anchored I felt in this body that feels a fuckload, that feels the full spectrum of life all the time. Before, I felt so untethered and like I was riding in the waves, no surfboard, no training, no ability to get out of this like tossing and tumbling that was happening all the time. More I was able to feel like I could stand steadfast and confident on that board in the waves and ride them. Because here's the thing, the waves never stop coming. The emotion never stops coming. You don't heal and all of a sudden you're like immune, impervious to the fucking painful elements of life. It's just more that like that emotion that was rising up in me became a superpower, became my ability to connect and see people deeply because I had seen myself deeply. And so I think that a lot of this idea that emotions are weakness and shutting them down and suppressing them and saying you're crazy or you're too emotional has to do with the fact that if we can't deal with the big emotions within ourselves, we cannot deal with the big emotions in other people. If I have not learned how to sit with the ache of my grief, with the absolute raging heat of my anger, with the really empty feeling of my disappointment, then how am I ever going to sit with that feeling or sit beside that feeling in other people? And so the more that I didn't know how to handle my too emotional side, the more I needed to shut that down in other people because I can't even deal with what's going on over here in my body. I certainly can't deal with what's going on over there in your body. And so while I think that there are many different reasons that we have come up with this narrative that too emotional, too dramatic, too crazy is a real bad thing, I believe that the more that we are able to handle and ride the waves of our own emotional experiences, the more we are able to accept, not only accept, welcome and encourage that in others. And I've seen it firsthand in myself. I used to be so fearful of anyone having a hard time around me, essentially, because I was going to take that on and it was going to live in my gut and I was not going to be able to survive it, essentially, because I hadn't proved to myself that I could survive feeling my own emotions fully and completely. And so I didn't encourage my friends to sit in it and that I would be there beside them because I didn't know how to sit beside them. And so I now understand more why people in my life have called me too dramatic, too emotional, because it serves them. It serves keeping them safe. Keep other people's emotions at arm's length, and that keeps me from having to feel my emotions, and it keeps me in the illusion of safety and control. Because life is fucking painful and it comes at you fast. And we have this silly little belief as humans that if we keep the pain at bay, if we keep it on the other side of the door, we are somehow going to be able to survive this go at being human on this planet better than if we let ourselves just feel the full spectrum of emotion. And the problem is that when we present emotions as a flaw, we suppress and hide them in order to stay liked and remain connected. Because as I have mentioned on several episodes of this podcast, at our core, human beings cannot survive in isolation as a single entity. We have to be in community, be in connection with others in order to survive on this planet. And to survive in this modern day and age is to be liked and to stay connected. And so if we have been taught, like I was, that to show your emotions, to wear your heart on your sleeve, to be sensitive, to feel it all is somehow a bad, unlikable, annoying thing, then naturally I'm going to shut that down to stay liked and connected, which unfortunately just perpetuates the whole cycle, the whole issue, as I have mentioned. But true emotional maturity is having a skill called emotional differentiation, which is the ability to hold multiple conflicting truths at once, to see the nuances in the person, to see that someone can be angry, they can be sad, they can need to be picked up off the floor of their grief and still be a wonderful, loving, light bearing human. Because we are not one or the other. We are all the things at once. And it's still something that I have to remind myself over and over again, because I am human, because I am not perfect, because I can have my friend or my partner have a big emotion. And all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. What's happening here? You're bringing the vibe down. Or why are you angry? What's wrong? Da, da, da. And I'm all of a sudden putting up this barrier, putting up this wall. No, no, no. Don't bring those emotions over here. You know how hard I'm trying to keep afloat right now. Don't you dare bring those emotions over here. And then I check myself and realize that the most compassionate, most connected, most vulnerable thing I can do is allow that person's wave of emotions to come over here, to come over me, and for them to not feel alone in it. Because what happens when we internalize this emotional suppression as a form of safety or survival, which, if you've experienced this, completely normal that you may be using this to survive, keeping other people's feelings out or keeping yourself on a certain level of connection with someone else and not taking it a step higher because of the pain or heartbreak that can come with that. But the more we internalize, the more we suppress emotions, the greater they get, the more persistent and insistent they get. I learned that so viscerally when I was experiencing daily anxiety, almost weekly bouts of depression. The more that I pretended and tried to shy away from feeling the full spectrum of everything, the more persistent my anxiety got, the deeper my depression got. And therefore, the more in control and safe I felt, but the less like myself I felt, and the less able to reach out and connect with others I felt. And it's not just about like our experience, like the more that we suppress our emotions, the worse we might feel. It can actually lead to like chronic illness, not just chronic mental illness, like I said, anxiety and depression, but chronic illness in the sense that they are now linking trauma, suppressing emotions, chronic stress to long-term illnesses like Alzheimer's, like heart disease, and even in some cases, cancers. And so the more we feel it, the healthier we are. And that is why I think too emotional is such a fucking myth, because too emotional keeps us in the mindset that we need to suppress and hide those emotions, and therefore the sicker that we are getting in society. And don't even get me started on what I think is an intentional cycle of sickness. Maybe I'll save that for another episode of the podcast. But the more we can feel, the more emotional we can be, the more that we can bring our whole human selves to our lives, and not just, behind closed doors in partnerships or friendships in the safety of our home, but I mean everywhere, online, at work, where it is traditionally very much frowned upon to bring emotion into it. The more we can do that, I think the more at peace we will find ourselves within our systems. One of the main reasons that I think our systems are so broken, our systems of work, our systems of culture and society, is because we are hiding who we truly are. And we are being made to feel like we are not allowed to express emotion, that is somehow a loss of control, or it is somehow a show of weakness, an inability to just stay logical and stoic and pushing forward and pushing through. No, we are built to be emotional. We are built to feel the full spectrum of life. And the sooner we get comfortable with that, the better it is going to be. Now, I do want to note that as I am sitting here saying, let your emotions out, people, it is extremely important that we have self-awareness alongside expressing our emotional depth. And I say that because it is not for you to put your emotions on someone else to project how you're feeling on another in order to avoid feeling it yourself. When I talk about expressing emotional depth, expressing and feeling your emotions by yourself and with others, I say that from a place of knowing that you have the capacity to manage and experience those feelings, that you have sat with the depths and the highs of your emotional experience in life, so that when you are experiencing emotions in relation to others, you are not doing it to escape those emotions. You are doing it to build greater connection and intimacy and to help each other feel more seen. Because without that self-awareness, without having felt and healed your relationship to feeling your emotions, you are simply just going to project your anger, your sadness, your grief, your whatever it is onto someone else. And that is not a healthy way to share and experience emotions in life. So there is absolutely a journey of self-awareness and understanding. And listen, you're never going to get it all right. It's never going to be perfect. Sometimes you are going to lash out. Sometimes you are going to throw your emotions that feel too big for your body in the moment out onto someone else in a desperate attempt for them to come in and save you from this feeling. It is extremely important that if that does happen, I mean, we're mitigating that happening as much as we can, but if that does happen, that we are able and self-aware enough to say, whoa, that outburst was not your fault. I was feeling too many things and I didn't know where to put it, and I accidentally put it on you. So sorry. Can you forgive me? I say that because I have had to do that many of times, especially with my partner. And it has been a very important part of our relationship and our growth for me to be able to admit when I wasn't exactly processing or feeling my emotions in a healthy way, and instead saying, can you please deal with this because I don't know how to deal with it. So how can we begin to express our emotions with power, clarity, and self-trust without apology? Honestly, this is something I am still working through. But the things I have learned really are a summary of what I've talked about so far. First and foremost, it's breaking up with the story that being too emotional or too sensitive is somehow wrong, when in fact, I actually think it's a fucking superpower. And the people who are feeling the full spectrum of life are the most awake and connected people I know. To be able to sit beside someone and talk about going to the dark fucking depths that our mind can go to and the things that we did or thought about doing to try to escape that, and to be able to sit there and hold that and see that person as a whole human being, not as a broken version of who they were when they were in the depths, but to sit there and be like, I fucking know, and I'm so proud of you for where you are now and for clawing your way back. That is powerful beyond measure. It is what makes teachers, coaches, leaders so fucking effective in how they impact people's lives, truly impact their lives, is their ability to hold space for that emotional depth. And so first we need to fucking break up with this story that being too emotional or too sensitive is somehow crazy or wrong. It is absolutely not. It is, and I believe this with my whole fucking chest, the future. And more emotion, more emotional awareness, but also more ability to hold the truth of life and not compartmentalize it into the ways that we have, is how we are going to move forward into a better version of our systems that we have created to this point. And once we are able to break up with that bullshit story and build self-compassion and self-love around being deeply emotional or simply just experiencing all emotions as a human, is simply just being able to feel that, to be able to sit with your emotions, to feel them all the way through and know that you will survive it. The first time you feel deep grief and pain, whether it be of heartbreak, of losing a loved one, of navigating illness or death or whatever, it feels like it is going to absolutely consume you. And then you get through it and you realize that you are far stronger than you ever knew. And it gives you that permission to feel it even more next time. And I think the strongest human beings on this planet are the ones who have gone to the depths of pain, to the depths of being a human in the shittiest fucking scenarios, and have allowed themselves to feel it all, whatever kind of timeline that looked like. But at some point, allowing yourself to feel it all and come out the other side, holy shit, watch out for those people. They are untouchable in a way that others who have not been through pain aren't. And I know that through going through my own version of it. You see life in a new way. But once we're able to sit with and feel those depths of pain and emotion ourselves and bring that self-awareness to it, that then allows us to sit with the emotions of others and stop blocking people out or cutting people off or keeping them at arm's length when it feels too much for your system to handle. And when you step into that, when you step into not only being able to feel the full spectrum of your emotions, but sit with the full spectrum of other people's emotions and not make it mean something about them and not compartmentalize them, but instead be able to hold the full nuance of you as a human being and the full nuance of them as a human being. Oh man, the power that comes with that, the clarity of what life is really about that comes with that. And the less that we apologize for having emotions, for allowing those emotions to come out and sit with others, the more depth of life we get to experience and the more we start to understand why we even experience emotions as humans in the first place. Because I think this kind of journey, this trajectory of becoming comfortable with feeling it all and then becoming comfortable with other people feeling it all in your presence is kind of the point of life. We are the only species that we know of on this planet and other planets who get to feel the way that we feel. And while that can feel like a fucking burden sometimes, it is also, I think, the greatest gift of life because there's always a counterpoint to an emotion, right? There is happiness to sadness. There is awe and inspiration to disappointment. There is mind-blowing love to grief. And if we remember those counterpoints to each emotion, we realize that we get to feel grief because we get to feel deep, deep love. We get to feel disappointment because we get to feel what it feels like to have our fucking dreams come true. And so I just want you to remember that if you have been told that you are too sensitive, too dramatic, too much, somewhere in that is your fucking superpower, is your ability to experience all that life has to offer and to do it in a way that is vulnerable and connected to those around you, because emotions connect us. Without them, we don't know how to empathize with another person's experience. We don't know how to see someone in a moment of life and share in that moment with them, whether it be deep belly laughter, exhilaration, excitement, or crumpled on the floor in tears. So do not buy into the bullshit narrative that showing and sharing your emotions somehow makes you weak or not capable or not a strong leader or not a great parent or not a good partner. With enough self-awareness, being too emotional and being too sensitive puts you leagues ahead of people who are suppressing and refusing to feel their emotions. So if you've ever been called too sensitive, too emotional, too much, I'm here to tell you that that is fucking bullshit. Feel everything, experience the full spectrum of life, because you do not want to be lying on your deathbed and thinking, I wish that I allowed more in. You want to be looking back and saying, fuck, it was fucking hard and it was so painful at times. And I would not trade it for a millisecond. Thanks for coming along for that little chat with me today. Until next time.